From the moment I could understand the world, it was clear I existed in the shadow of a sun. Not my own sun, but the blinding, all-consuming glow of my older brother, Brendan. He was the golden boy, the prodigy, the family's pride and joy. I was Eleanor, or more often, Brendan's little sister. My parents, bless their hearts, never explicitly said they loved him more, but their actions screamed it in a symphony of favoritism that became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every achievement of mine, no matter how hard won, was met with a polite nod, quickly followed by a story of Brendan's latest triumph. Every mistake I made was a moral failing. Every one of Brendan's was an adorable quirk. I learned early on that my feelings, my struggles, my very existence were secondary to the golden narrative woven around him. I tried for years to earn their approval, to carve out my own space. I excelled academically, poured my heart into art, even joined the debate team, hoping to find a platform where my voice might finally be heard. But the pattern was relentless. If I got an A, Brendan had gotten an A+ last year. If I won an art competition, Brendan had won a national science fair. It wasn't just the comparison, it was the way my parents' eyes would light up when he spoke, the way their attention would snap to him, leaving me feeling like a faded photograph in a vibrant album. Brendan, of course, thrived on this. He wasn't overtly malicious, not in a cartoon villain way. His cruelty was far more insidious. It was the casual dismissal, the subtle undermining, the way he'd accidentally take credit for my ideas in front of family friends, or forget to tell me about a family outing until it was too late. He knew he was untouchable, and that knowledge gave him an arrogant confidence that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. I often felt like a ghost haunting my own home, visible only when I caused a problem, and then only to be chastised. By the time I was in my junior year of high school, a deep-seated weariness had settled in my bones. I was tired of fighting for recognition, tired of being overlooked. My escape, my lifeline, was science. Specifically, a complex biophysics project I'd been developing for months. It was ambitious, challenging, and utterly mine. This project wasn't just about a grade. It was my ticket out. A state-level science fair scholarship was on the line, a chance for a full ride to a university far, far away from the gilded cage of my family home. I poured every waking hour, every ounce of my frustration and hope into it. My room became a labyrinth of circuit boards, petri dishes, and scientific literature. I barely slept, fueled by cheap coffee and the desperate hope of a future where I wasn't just Brendan's sister. The project was a biosensor designed to detect minute changes in water quality with potential applications in environmental monitoring. It was intricate, requiring delicate calibration and a precise balance of chemical reagents. I was in the final stages, the presentation just a week away, when the unthinkable happened. I had spent a grueling Saturday in the lab, meticulously running tests, and left everything meticulously organized, covered, and labeled. The next morning, I walked into my makeshift lab, my heart pounding with anticipation, only to be met with a sight that made my blood run cold. The entire setup was in disarray. Wires were tangled, a beaker of critical reagents was overturned, its contents spilled and contaminating everything. My carefully cultivated bacterial cultures, the heart of my sensor, were ruined, a murky, useless sludge. It wasn't just a mess, it was an act of deliberate sabotage. My hands trembled as I surveyed the wreckage, a cold dread seeping into my stomach. Months of work, countless sleepless nights, my future, all reduced to a heap of ruined components. My first thought, an instinct born of years of experience, was Brendan. He had been home all weekend, supposedly studying for an exam, but his studying often involved wandering around, bored, looking for something to entertain himself with. I remembered him poking his head into my room the previous evening, a smirk playing on his lips as he asked, "Still playing mad scientist, Ellie? Don't blow us up." I had dismissed it then, but now a chilling certainty gripped me. I confronted him, my voice shaking with a mixture of fury and despair. "Brendan, what did you do to my project?" He looked up from his phone, feigning innocence, a perfect mask of bewildered concern. "What are you talking about, Ellie? I haven't touched your weird science stuff." His eyes, however, flickered, a telltale sign I'd learned to recognize over the years. He knew. "Don't lie to me!" I screamed, my voice cracking. "My entire project is ruined. The cultures, the sensor, everything. You were the only one home." He sighed dramatically, putting his phone down. For crying out loud, Ellie. You're always so dramatic. Maybe you just messed it up yourself. You're always so clumsy. Besides, it's just a dumb science project. There's always next year." The casual cruelty of his words, the dismissive wave of his hand, ignited a firestorm within me. It wasn't just the project. It was the years of being told I was less, of being invisible, of having my passions belittled. Something inside me snapped. I don't remember exactly what I said, but it was a torrent of every suppressed insult, every injustice, every raw, festering wound he had inflicted over the years. I called him a narcissist, a manipulative liar, a parasite who fed on the achievements of others. I accused him of deliberately destroying my future out of jealousy. My voice grew louder, shriller, until I was practically howling, tears of rage and frustration streaming down my face. I might have even lunged at him, a desperate, pathetic attempt to physically inflict the pain he had caused me emotionally. He, of course, recoiled, playing the terrified victim, yelling for our parents. And just like clockwork, they appeared, drawn by the commotion. Their faces immediately hardened when they saw me, red-faced and screaming, while Brendan stood there wide-eyed and trembling, a picture of innocent victimhood. Their gazes, usually so soft for him, were ice cold for me. "Eleanor, what is the meaning of this?" my mother demanded, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You are out of control." My father stepped forward, putting a protective arm around Brendan. "Eleanor, look at your brother. What has gotten into you?" I tried to explain, to articulate the depth of Brendan's betrayal, the destruction of my project, the sheer injustice of it all. He ruined my science project, my scholarship. He always does this. He sabotages everything I care about because he can't stand anyone else getting attention. But my words fell on deaf ears. They saw only my wild accusations, my unhinged anger. Brendan, with tears welling in his eyes, mumbled, "I don't know what she's talking about. I was just in my room. She just started screaming at me." My parents didn't even question him. Not a single doubt flickered in their eyes. My mother turned to me, her voice now dangerously calm. "Eleanor, you will apologize to your brother immediately. This behavior is unacceptable. Attacking your brother, making wild accusations, it's disgraceful." "Apologize?" I shrieked, disbelief warring with fury. "He destroyed my project. He destroyed my chances. Why should I apologize for reacting to his cruelty?" My father's jaw tightened. "Eleanor, that's enough. We don't tolerate such disrespect in this house. You will apologize, or we will have to consider severe consequences. We're talking about school suspension, young lady. We'll call Principal Hayes first thing Monday morning and explain your disruptive and aggressive behavior." Suspension. The word hung in the air, a death knell to my scholarship hopes. Not only would I lose my project, but my academic record would be tarnished, making any university application an uphill battle. It was a clear threat, a weapon wielded to force me into submission, to protect their golden boy's flawless image. The injustice of it all was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath. They weren't just asking me to apologize, they were asking me to lie, to invalidate my own pain, to surrender to the narrative that I was the problem and Brendan was the blameless victim. In that moment, looking at their stern, unwavering faces, and at Brendan's subtly triumphant smirk peeking through his feigned distress, something shifted within me. The years of trying to please them, of desperately seeking their approval, evaporated. A cold, hard resolve began to crystallize. I would not apologize. Not for this. Not ever. If they wanted a fight, I would give them a war. "I won't apologize," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tempest raging inside me. He did it, and I won't lie to protect him. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by Brendan's sharp intake of breath. My parents stared at me, their expressions a mixture of shock and outrage. They had expected me to crumble, to beg for forgiveness. They had expected me to conform. But that Eleanor was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone forged in the fires of injustice. "Fine," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Then we'll see about that suspension. And don't think for a second you'll be getting any help from us for college if you can't even act like a decent human being." That night, I didn't sleep. The wreckage of my science project lay untouched, a grim monument to my shattered dreams. But instead of despair, a fierce determination began to burn. I would prove Brendan's guilt. I would expose their favoritism, and I would do it in a way that left no room for doubt, no opportunity for them to sweep it under the rug. This wasn't just about my project anymore. It was about reclaiming my narrative, about finally being seen, truly seen. I started by meticulously documenting the damage, photographs, detailed notes, even samples of the contaminated cultures. I knew the school lab had security cameras, but they were usually only monitored for serious incidents. Getting access would be difficult, especially with my parents already threatening to paint me as a delinquent. I needed a different angle. I remembered a conversation I'd overheard between Brendan and his best friend, Kevin, a few weeks prior. Brendan had been bragging about how he'd fixed Kevin's failing history project by borrowing some research from another student's computer. He'd even hinted at having a knack for getting into places he shouldn't. My mind latched onto that. Brendan was clever, but he was also arrogant. Arrogance bred carelessness. My first step was to think like Brendan. If he wanted to sabotage my project without being caught, how would he do it? He wouldn't use obvious tools. He'd use something innocuous, something that could be easily dismissed. I remembered him being particularly interested in my water filtration system, specifically the pump. He'd made a comment about how fragile it looked. Fragile enough to snap a small component, perhaps, causing a chain reaction of failure? I went back to the lab, flashlight in hand, and began a forensic examination. I checked every connection, every tube, every discarded piece of material. And then, tucked away behind a shelf, almost hidden by a stack of old textbooks, I found it. A small, almost imperceptible crack in the housing of the micropump, right where a tiny, crucial O-ring had been. It looked like it had been pried open, not broken by accident. And next to it, partially obscured, was a faint, iridescent smudge. It was the same type of glitter I remembered Brendan using for a school art project weeks ago. He had a habit of leaving a trail of glitter everywhere he went, much to my mother's exasperation. This wasn't enough, though. Glitter could be circumstantial. I needed something irrefutable. My thoughts turned to the security cameras in the school hallways and, more importantly, the school's computer lab. The science fair projects were often stored in a secure annex connected to the main lab, and the hallway leading there had a camera. I knew Principal Hayes was a stickler for rules, but also a fair man if presented with undeniable facts. The challenge was getting the footage. I knew the school's network administrator, Mr. Henderson, was a kind, slightly eccentric man who ran the robotics club I used to be a part of. He'd always been impressed with my coding skills. I decided to approach him. It was a long shot, but I was desperate. On Monday morning, instead of heading straight to my first class, I went to Mr. Henderson's office. I explained, calmly and clearly, what had happened, omitting the detail about my parents' threat of suspension. I told him I suspected sabotage and needed to review the security footage from the hallway leading to the science lab annex, specifically from Saturday afternoon. I emphasized that my entire scholarship depended on this project. Mr. Henderson, seeing the genuine distress in my eyes and knowing my academic history, was hesitant but sympathetic. Eleanor, accessing that footage isn't a simple matter. It requires a formal request from administration. I know, Mr. Henderson, I pleaded, but if I go through administration, it'll be bogged down in bureaucracy. My presentation is in less than a week. Please, just let me see it. If there's nothing there, I'll drop it. But if there is, I promise I'll handle it appropriately. I even offered to help him debug some of the robotics club's code, a task he often struggled with. He sighed, rubbing his temples. All right, Eleanor, just for a quick look, but you didn't hear it from me, and if Principal Hayes asks, you came to me with a formal request. Understood? I nodded vigorously, a spark of hope igniting within me. He pulled up the footage. We fast-forwarded through hours of empty hallway until, finally, Saturday afternoon. And there he was, Brendan, casually strolling towards the science lab annex, looking left and right, then slipping inside. He emerged about 15 minutes later, adjusting his backpack, a subtle, almost imperceptible smirk on his face. He didn't carry anything suspicious, but the timing, the furtive glances, the smirk, it was enough. It was more than enough. Can you make a copy of this, Mr. Henderson? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He looked at me, then at the screen, then back at me. He knew what this meant. He knew the implications. He also knew Brendan's reputation as the golden boy and the lengths some parents would go to protect their children. After a moment, he nodded. For your own records, Eleanor, just in case. He burned a copy onto a USB drive, his expression grim. Armed with the footage and my detailed notes, I went home. My parents were waiting, their faces stern. Have you thought about what we said, Eleanor? Are you ready to apologize to your brother? My mother asked, her tone implying that this was my last chance to avoid the guillotine. I took a deep breath. Yes, I've thought about it, and no, I'm not apologizing. My father slammed his hand on the table. That's it. I'm calling Principal Hayes first thing tomorrow. You're suspended, Eleanor, and don't think you'll be getting back into that science fair. Your behavior is an embarrassment. Before you do that, I said, my voice cutting through their anger, I think there's something you both need to see. I pulled out the USB drive. And Brendan, you might want to pay attention too. Brendan, who had been lounging on the sofa with a smug expression, suddenly looked uneasy. My parents exchanged confused glances. What is this, Eleanor? Some kind of stunt? My mother scoffed. I ignored her, plugging the USB into the living room smart TV. The grainy security footage flickered to life. My parents watched, bewildered, as the timestamp ticked by. Then, Brendan appeared on screen. His furtive glances, his entry into the lab, his exit with that telltale smirk. My mother gasped. My father leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, scrutinizing the screen. Brendan, meanwhile, had gone pale. It's nothing. I just went to get a book from the library, he stammered, his voice cracking. The library is on the other side of the school, Brendan, I stated calmly. And the science lab annex is locked on weekends. You'd need a key, or you'd have to break in. I paused, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. After you left, my entire science project was ruined. My micropump, specifically, was tampered with. I found traces of glitter, the same kind you use, near the point of damage. My parents turned to Brendan, their faces a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. The Golden Boy's carefully constructed facade was crumbling before their very eyes. Brendan, is this true? My father asked, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. Brendan stammered, his eyes darting between me and the screen, trapped. No, she's lying. She's always trying to get me in trouble. Am I? I countered, my voice rising slightly. Or am I just tired of being blamed for your actions? Tired of you getting away with everything? Remember Kevin's history project? You boasted to him about fixing it. You've been doing this for years, Brendan, undermining me, sabotaging me, because you can't stand not being the center of attention. The silence was absolute, heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. My parents looked at their golden son, then at me, the problem child. The contrast was stark. I was presenting undeniable evidence, calmly and rationally, while Brendan was reduced to desperate, transparent lies. My mother started to cry, a soft, heartbroken sound. My father, his face etched with a profound disappointment I had never seen directed at Brendan, slowly turned off the TV. He looked at Brendan, then at me. Eleanor, is this why you wouldn't apologize? Yes, Dad, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Because I didn't do anything wrong. I was reacting to being repeatedly hurt and sabotaged. And you always believed him, no matter what. You always punished me. That hit them hard. The realization, the uncomfortable truth of their unwavering favoritism hung in the air. They couldn't deny it, not now, not with the evidence, and not with Brendan's pathetic attempts at denial. The next morning was a whirlwind. My father, looking haggard and defeated, called Principal Hayes. He didn't threaten suspension. Instead, he requested a meeting, explaining that there had been a misunderstanding and that he had new information. I went with him, armed with my USB drive and my notes. The meeting with Principal Hayes was tense. Brendan was there, sullen and defiant, flanked by my parents who looked utterly devastated. I presented the footage, the glitter evidence, my notes on the damaged pump. Principal Hayes, a stern but fair man, watched with a growing frown. Brendan, under direct questioning, finally broke down, admitting to tampering with my project, but still trying to frame it as an accident, a prank gone wrong. But the footage, the deliberate entry into a locked area, spoke volumes. The fallout was swift and severe. Brendan was suspended for a week, not for my outburst, but for breaking into the lab and deliberately damaging school property and a fellow student's project. He was also stripped of his position as student body vice president and banned from participating in any extracurricular activities for the remainder of the year. The scholarship committee, after reviewing the evidence and the school's disciplinary action, decided to give me an extension to reconstruct my project. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a chance. At home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. My parents were shattered. Their golden boy, their perfect son, had been exposed as a manipulative, jealous saboteur. The image they had so carefully cultivated, both for themselves and for the world, lay in ruins. They didn't apologize to me immediately, not with words, but their actions began to change. They started listening. They started seeing me. They encouraged me as I painstakingly rebuilt my project, offering help without being asked, something they had never done before. Brendan was forced to confront the consequences of his actions. He was stripped of his privileges, grounded indefinitely, and for the first time, I saw genuine shame, not just fear of punishment, in his eyes. He tried to apologize to me, clumsily at first, then with a sincerity that surprised me. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start, a tiny crack in the wall that had stood between us for so long. I did eventually rebuild my project, working even harder than before. I didn't win the state scholarship. The delay and the emotional toll had been too much, but I did receive an honorable mention and a smaller regional scholarship that would still help me pursue my dreams. More importantly, I had won something far more valuable, my voice. I had stood up for myself, exposed the truth, and forced my parents to confront their own blind spots. The Golden Boy's reign was over, and in its place, a fragile but real sense of balance was beginning to emerge in our family. I was no longer just Eleanor, Brendan's sister, existing in his shadow. I was Eleanor, who fought for herself, who spoke her truth, and who finally saw a path to her own son.